This is now a Bridge to a Better World. I'm Teresa Mitchell, and that's Ani Haynes.
And it is a fantastic morning. I think I finally figured out a little technical, tiny technical issue that will help us hopefully uh, be better at consistently starting, with stuff and such. I don't need to narrate my process, but I'm really excited. And as Teresa said, though, possibly as we were actually becoming live, this is now Bridge to a Better World. I'm Ani. That's Teresa.
Yes, and just to be sure, we actually broadcast that.
Yeah. Well, stream.
Well, and today, as the sign says, we are concerned about the outbreak of war and just how extensive it might be. Right now, China has been engaged in very extensive preparations for a war to take Taiwan, or as they would say, to retake Taiwan. It's an odd situation there compared to the way it has been since the 1940s. Namely, that the original party that broke off from China actually fled the communists, the Kuomintang, is the chief negotiating party with China at this point, because the Kuomintang are open to all I can think of is Anschluss. The word is not Anschluss. They are not Germans. They're open to recombining with China, let's say, under whatever circumstances. And the Chinese propaganda agencies have been working through them, no doubt, funding them to some degree. This is nothing new in Taiwan, but the possibly the stronger party, and they have elections coming up, is saying that it's been too long and they really feel independent in Taiwan. And arguably, they have developed a democratic process. As a matter of fact, they're rated more democratic at this point than the United States. And they don't really want to go back to having one person, one committee, where in this case, Xi Jinping telling them what to do. So it's not a situation that lends itself to a peaceful resolution, except that the Chinese just need to back down. Of course, they're not going to do it. And they have been putting together hundreds of ships, each with aircraft killer missiles. They have been putting together the list of logistics and war preparations is long. They have been preparing to strike the United States, actually, and Japan. And military analysts are saying that China doesn't have a good chance of taking Taiwan if it does not first strike the U.S., possibly as far as Guam. And when I say strike, I mean launch what would presumably be conventional missiles, but very large missiles, ballistic missiles with 1,000-pound warheads at U.S. installations, an act which would remind people of the Japanese strike on Pearl Harbor. This is imminent, actually. This is a situation that is on the edge of happening, and that doesn't mean that it will happen, but if preparations mean anything, then there's a very good chance that it will happen very soon, perhaps within months, maybe as early as February. Their invading window in terms of weather is better in April, but who knows whether they will wait. They would then have to launch a really bloody invasion. The preparations from Taiwan have been criticized on many levels for not having lots in the way of, modern jet aircraft. But they do have everything down to like mounted flechettes at the beaches. So if you try to crawl across the beaches in certain places, you'll cut yourself bloody. It would be, a really bloody and extensive conflict, and alarming, I should think, because of the power of the Chinese military, and of course the possibility of it blowing up into a thermonuclear war.
And that's so sort of looking at, looking at the theme for this week, that comforting theme of what is it? How many countries need to be at war with each other? How many countries does the U.S. need to be engaged in armed conflict with to actually be considered a world war? What made World War One World War One? What made World War Two World War Two? As opposed to there's a regional conflict, right? And so you're just detailing some of the conflicts happening right
Yeah,
now
I'm just
in
barely getting
Asia,
started. Yeah,
right?
just the tip of
Yeah,
my comments. Yeah.
right. I wanted to sort of give it a little background,
Right.
Set a little context that Asia and in fact this particular conflict in Asia is not the only thing happening, right?
Yes, and this is an interesting situation because this happens outside of the Russian sphere of influence, unlike so many other aspects of the coming conflict. For example, North Korea. This is where it intersects. The Russians have been buying arms in a huge way from North Korea, particularly artillery shells, and offering rocketry assistance to North Korea in partial exchange. And this means that North Korea has finally launched a satellite, something they've been trying to do for more than a decade, if I recall correctly. And their military is therefore becoming more fierce. Their military has always taken the low road. For example, they have many. It's not hundreds, I think it's thousands of tons of poison gas that they have prepared for use in the event of a war. Of course, they do now have a couple of nuclear weapons, probably don't have the delivery systems for them, but they're very proud of that. And their talk has become more belligerent. Of course, I can't say that without pointing out that the U.S. has been continually conducting war games directly on their border, as fierce and as provocative as possible. This is something that the U.S. has largely brought about, the militarization of the Koreans. The North Koreans started after Curtis LeMay bombed everything he could possibly find and complained that he wasn't able to find buildings to bomb at some point. Speaking of genocide in the World Court and that sort of thing. But
which we haven't yet, but we're gonna.
Which we haven't yet, but we will. So just to give an idea of just how tense things are across the world, of course, this same Russia is attacking Ukraine and holding its territory nicely. Thank you. We have heard for the last since the Russians first started to get pushed back to their current borders. We have heard that the Ukrainians are likely to win at any moment. This does not appear to be the case right now. The offensive has petered out. The Russians have dug in, and it looks like it will be very difficult to push them out of Donetsk, Luhansk, and Crimea. And so for Putin at this point, and I don't want to confuse anyone, I couldn't be more anti-Putin, but at this point, Putin is doing well in terms of popularity because the war effort has forced him to expend a great deal of reserves, even gold reserves, and to sell a lot of oil. And so people are getting more jobs and bigger wages. Of course, the downside is that a lot of people have died, and he's unpopular because of that. But it's hard for people to say anything against him, first because they might get thrown out of a window, and second because they're getting the money. Money is coming in, and that shuts people up in any culture, certainly including the United States. Then in the Middle East, things have not been presented to us. I'm sorry, you were going to say?
Oh no, go right ahead. I was just when you said when people are getting money, then they are apt to feel better about what's going on, and this reminded me just about what some folks are saying in support of Trump, in that Oh, well, those stimulus checks for the pandemic came in under his administration, and so people are remembering that and associating it with Trump, and how those stimulus checks came about because of Bernie Sanders, actually, and progressives in the legislature uh, demanding relief for the people, and then Trump made sure that he got to sign them as if they were his personal checks, so that he could get some publicity for it, which seems to be paying off. 4 years later, 5 years later.
Which promoted that sort of dim-witted non-analysis. And when you hear someone like me say dim-witted non-analysis, the response is elitist. We hate people like you.
So anyway,
Trump forever.
I didn't mean to totally take us off the track of World War.
No, this is part of it.
But in fact, it sounded real similar there.
Yeah.
Carry on.
This is part
Carry
of it. So we are not being given the truth about the situation in the Middle East. Israel is not, as it is claiming at the International Court of Justice, is not defending itself against Gazans. And so for those of you who are thinking of October 7th right now, that might sound a little shocking. So let me frame it in actual time and in actual action. October 7th was a huge, bloody, terrifying, monstrous prison breakout. It required a huge, determined police action that didn't happen. What happened instead is Israel decided, when I say Israel, I mean the leaders of Israel, the Kahanists who are in charge right now, decided that this was finally time. This is their excuse to exterminate Palestine, and they are doing that, and it's very obvious. And so South Africa, whose citizens know what it's like to live under apartheid and to be hated for their race, has come to the court and brought these charges, and I think it's a good thing. And that brings up another bogus comment. This is that I often hear that. I lost my track.
Well, let me just sort of jump in for a second. Maybe your bogus comment will come right back into your head. South Africa opened that case in the International Criminal Court yesterday. And they are asking for an emergency order for Israel to suspend its ongoing actions, its relentless assaults in Gaza at this point, at about 100 days. South African jurists have argued that Israel's violating 4 articles of the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, commonly called the Genocide Convention. South African lawyers detailed Israel's conduct in the war, including killing and wounding more than 80,000 Palestinians, killing and wounding over 80,000 Palestinians in about 100 days. Most of those killed and wounded have been women and children, forcibly displacing over 85% of the Palestinians in Gaza. That's just, I saw some numbers, about 1.9 million people have been displaced out of 2.3 million people. So, that's a lot of folks that are now without any place to be or resources. They, excuse me, South Africa's jurists have cited at length statements by leaders of Israel and Israeli officials calling for the destruction and even the nuclear annihilation of Gaza. And they have not resorted to using the graphic imagery that we have all become so accustomed to and horrified by on the daily news. Instead, they're relying on their words. They're relying on the rule of law and arguing clear legal rights in their case. So I just wanted to mention a little bit more about this case. Jeremy Scahill, who is an American independent investigative journalist, has says this. In its opening argument thus far, South Africa has made a compelling case showing how the genocidal statements by Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu and other senior officials were interpreted as official orders by Israeli forces in their attacks against Gaza. Beyond these citations of the vast civilian deaths and injuries caused in Israel and Gaza, South Africa's lawyers argued effectively that Israel's evacuation orders were in and of themselves genocidal, demanding the immediate flight of 1 million people, including patients in hospitals. We know you cannot force relocation of an entire population. That is a war crime. That is against the Genocide Convention. And I'm going to say further that Israel not only demanded the relocation, but then bombed the areas that people were relocated to. So Scahill adds what becomes crystal clear listening to the openly genocidal words of Netanyahu and other Israeli officials is that they know exactly what they are saying, and they're comfortable saying these things publicly because they know that the U.S. will in fact shield them from, accountability. They're expected to. I'm sorry. So today, Israel is taking the stand in the International Criminal Court, and they're expected to focus heavily on the atrocities committed by the Hamas leaders who attacked who killed about 1,100 Israelis and have taken over 200 people hostage. And this is what, Teresa was just talking about. They say that they have to defend themselves, and that it is seeking only to eliminate Hamas and not Palestinian people generally.
Yes, that's where my brain went boink because I was trying to remember that. Am I?
Yes, no, go right ahead.
I was trying to remember that I keep hearing that, it's not a matter of white versus brown. Yes, it very much is. And there are historic reasons for this. It was primarily immigrants from Europe that came over before the Second World War and caused the Nakba, and in 48, 49, after the formation of Israel, some 600,000 people came over from Europe, most of them from surviving the Third Reich. So how ironic is it that this nation now, of course, not exactly this, it's not the same people. It's the children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren of these people are being charged with genocide. But that argument is not valid. Overwhelming numbers of white people came from Europe. They brought their anti-brown attitudes with them, which were common in Europe at the time. I'm not saying that they're certainly not unique to Jews, but that is very much a part of Israeli culture that has been obvious and commented on as Israelis have come and gone from cities in the U.S. That are commonly launch pads for immigration to and from Israel. So I want to put that counter argument out of the way. And so what we're being told is that Israel is defending itself. This is not the case. And as I've mentioned before, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
There is also the matter of very tasty development already starting to happen in the bombed out territories, which are intended to be occupied by Israelis, no matter what anyone says. The real estate plans are going forward, and the plans for making a canal between the Mediterranean and the the Dead Sea, are happening.
Right. I just wanted to mention, as excited, that's not the right word. I support South Africa's case in the World Court. I think it's extremely important. And there was a moment when it was first happening, I was like, oh, evidence-based presentation in the World Court. Surely this will stop this will stop the slaughter that is ongoing every day. More horrors are dealt out to the people who are in Gaza. And I was looking for that immediate relief and feeling just a little bit of hope. And then I realized of course, that an emergency order from the World Court is not actually enforceable, and it's going to take weeks for them to decide. And the best that we can hope for at this point is the facts becoming clear to the world so that there's a major international outcry and international pressure for accountability from Israel, for a stop of the slaughter from Israel, and a serious wake up call to their few ongoing allies, chiefly the United States. There's a growing number of nations supporting South Africa's case, including Brazil, Pakistan, Turkey, Malaysia, Venezuela, Colombia, Saudi Arabia, Bolivia, Jordan, Bangladesh, the Arab League, more than 1,200 international human rights and civil society groups, as well as some U.S. Congress representatives, notably Rashida Tlaib and Cori Bush. And I wanted to just sort of finish off the case at The Hague currently.
Yeah, and I hope that it results in some slowing down of the rush to war. And so we were talking about a world war, and I want to explain further why this and in what manner it is shaping up into a world war. One, I don't want to say axis, but one focal point, of course, as I was saying, is Russia. Russia's been buying very extensive fleets of drones from Iran. This means not only cash going to Iran, but of course, technological aid is also flowing back and forth from Iran and Russia. Iran is very much connected to Hezbollah, somewhat less so to the Houthis. You always see Iran-backed Houthi militias when the action in the Gulf is described, and that has always been an exaggeration. Perhaps it will be less so now out of exigency. The Houthis will need reloading with their missiles if they intend to continue that war, or indeed if they intend to fight back at all. And so they will doubtless go to the only source available to them at this point in large numbers and with familiar objects of war, which would be Iran. For example, they had some leftover missiles, which they fired at Saudi Arabia at one point, and they had no launchers, and they got launchers from Iran. So, okay, this is something that is becoming more true simply because being forced to be true. But it is also clear that the U.S. and Israel have been trying to force a wider war in the Gulf. And why they think this is a good idea, I mean, they've got their reasons, and they've doubtless talked about it in great detail. Of course, it has to do with hegemony in oil. And it's more complex than that, but it does look that way, especially when, as I've mentioned before, the Israelis assassinated one person in Beirut by bombing a hotel in Beirut. Just an act of war. No two ways around it. They blew up a hotel with saying they needed to get one person, and by the way, saying "fuck you" to all persons who were anywhere near them. Collective punishment, very much in the way that they've been applying to the Gazans.
And also a big fuck you to international borders, sovereignty, as if Lebanon was not its own space, that maybe they're going to resent being
it's a sovereign nation, and Hezbollah is something that exists on their borders closer to Israel as a defense against Israel. And Hezbollah's rocketry is very extensive, and they are able to threaten quite sorry to use the word blitz on Tel Aviv, and they may be doing that at any moment. So the flag of Hezbollah says "Death to Israel, death to America," and this is also true of the not the Gazan, but the Hamas flag. So these things are deeply ingrained. These hatreds are deep enough, and now they are being stirred up just as badly as they can. So Russia benefits, but Russia is also supplying arms and possibly cash to the combatants. And I would like to add, Russia has been supplying ideological support. I don't know whether they're supplying arms yet, but ideological support and cash to MAGA. And I think that needs to sink in. We're in
Say that one more time.
Russia has been supplying MAGA, and we see little bits and pieces of it. It comes across in the press, a spy here, a payoff there, but They're jiggering the web. They're talking with Elon Musk. They're trying to stir up MAGA as much as they can, hoping for a civil war in the United States, which is becoming closer and closer to fruition with the mad antics of a certain Mr. Trump. So I think that we are on the precipice of an international conflagration, with Russia being one center supporting. I don't mean to. This is okay. I am going to over-exaggerate, oversimplify. Russia supporting Iran.
So I'm sorry, you're going to oversimplify, not over-exaggerate.
Yeah.
That's a big difference.
Oversimplify. I want to oversimplify a bit, but there is a connection between Russia and Iran, Russia, and of course, therefore, the Hezbollah. And I don't know if they manage logistically. I think it would be difficult for them to support. They may be able to get some arms to the Gazans. And of course, that would inflame the Americans and the Israelis even more. I don't see how they would stop that. But then we have the Chinese, who are connected to the Russians via the North Koreans, because the Chinese have always used North Korea as a backstop to the U.S. And the Chinese have been successful in stopping the U.S. in Korea before. They are likely to once again use those mass, not afraid to die attacks, not afraid to die in the name of the great leader, versus Taiwan. And all of this could become much worse within a day. And I think we need to call for a stop to it all. This is a madness that doesn't have to happen. It's leaning towards happening. It's toppling and crumbling towards happening, but it doesn't have to happen.
Yeah, I want to actually talk for a moment specifically around the U.S. and British joint mission in the Middle East, wherein they bombed or they carried out airstrikes, against the Houthis. And it's important to just contextualize how militarized the entire area is. In fact, how militarized the entire world is, right? The U.S. continues to have a major military presence in the Middle East. We have about 2,500 troops in Iraq. We have about 900 troops in Syria. According to Reuters News, since the Israel-Hamas war began in October, the U.S. military has come under attack at least 100 times in Iraq and Syria, usually with a mix of rockets and one-way drone attacks. The U.S., for its part, has bombed Syria and Iraq multiple times over the past several months in response to drone and missile attacks. So there has been this ongoing, I'm not going to say really low intensity, because I have a hard time saying low intensity when it comes to drone strikes and bombs. But there we have it. This has been going on in an increased way as background noise in the region as the world focuses, and rightly so, on the horrific conditions and the horrific attacks going on in Gaza right now. So a week ago, the U.S. carried out an airstrike in central Baghdad to retaliate for some of those other attacks, and that strike killed Mushtaq Jawad Kazim al-Jarrari, the leader of an Iran-aligned militia group that is operating in Iraq and Syria, as well as 3 other people associated with him. Through all of this bloodshed, I'm just going to say our cat Ozymandias has a lot to say about this.
Yes.
All right. Ozymandias, he doesn't like war so much. It makes him nervous, and then he barfs up hairballs.
Oh, is that what's making him barf up hairballs?
Yes, I'm sure of it.
8 times yesterday I had to clean up his hairballs.
I'm sure it's just war nerves. And not the fact that he's an extraordinarily beautiful and long-haired cat. Okay. I digress. Sorry, Ozzy. Through all this bloodshed military force, I'm just going to say Biden keeps saying that he wants to bring stability and peace to the region. And that's why he's acting in this way. That's why he's backing the Israeli government's actions without reservation. That's why he's saying, yes, We need to uh, support our allies, our most important allies in this region. Whatever they say, we will happily help them with. That's sort of what he is saying, and he says that he's doing it because he wants to support peace, because he wants to support stability. And I'm just going to say, you cannot bomb for peace. You cannot bomb for peace. Michael Franti said you cannot. You can bomb the world to pieces, but you can't bomb the world to peace. And I believe him. So I'm just going to talk for a minute about critics and what they're saying, warning that attacking Yemen is not the route to peace, but in fact, it risks setting off a more generalized powder keg throughout the Middle East. Trita Parsi is the executive vice president of the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft. That's a lobbying group and think tank that is their primary mission is to steer states away from engaging in endless war and onto paths that emphasize, diplomacy, statecraft, that sort of thing. So, the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft, Trita Parsi, says the most effective way of avoiding escalation is not to bomb the Houthis, but to actually secure a ceasefire in Gaza. Who's to imagine that peace could bring peace?
Well, and that's what the Houthis, after all, are asking for.
That's exactly right. So he goes on to say, I think he's about to say exactly the same thing you're saying. So I'm just going to continue quoting Parsi.
Yes.
If the objective is to stop Houthi attacks without escalating matters to a full war, then bombing them has proven quite inefficient in the past. Just ask the Saudis. Indeed, if the objective is to stop them, a ceasefire in Gaza is far more likely to succeed. The Houthis have declared that they will stop if Israel stops. And during the 6 days in November that there was a ceasefire, there was only one attack in the Red Sea that can be attributed to the Houthis. But Biden does not even consider that. Instead, he says he's getting ready for a regional war. And Parsi just finishes up by saying that's a dereliction of his duty to keep the American people safe because, in fact, amping up endless war does not make us safe.
And it would seem that amping is working in the sense of the Iranians have shown some temper just yesterday there was an oil tanker, a large oil tanker that was taken some years ago under one of the rounds of sanctions against the Iranians, which have been going off and on since the election of Ronald Reagan. The U.S. had renamed, or whoever they sold it to had renamed the tanker. But the Iranians, of course, are very well aware that it was their tanker, and they snatched it back yesterday with their capital warships. They went out there and said, "You're coming with us," told them to turn off their transponder, and floated away towards Iranian territory. So now there's that on top of everything else, and I'm sure you'll be hearing about it one way or another on the precipice of a world war.
So, I'm going to put it out there. I think I've said this before, even on this show. I don't know what that dividing line is between we have a whole lot of regional wars going on in this part of the world, that part of the world, and the other part of the world, and they all kind of have different tie into each other and of course the arms manufacturers are the only ones that are actually winning here. I think we're there. I think that you can only have so many regional wars spanning more than half the globe before you say, yeah, it's a world war.
The U.S., of course, has more arms and material of war than the other nations combined, but it doesn't mean that they could win, whatever that means.
There is no winning in war.
Yes.
Unless you're an arms manufacturer, in which case.
So aside from the provocations and ongoing fights that I've mentioned so far, it's possible that the next move may be China taking an island very close to their coast, which is owned by Taiwan that has something like 120,000 people on it, they may just say, okay, this is ours now, just as provocation, just to see what the U.S. does. So that might be the next thing, or not. It's possible.
Oh my. Okay, well, I'm gonna. I think it's time to pivot. Shall we pivot?
Let's pivot.
I'm just gonna give a quick update. We're gonna have a regular segment, I think, because this is just to, no matter what other topic is happening, we cannot forget the Christo-fascist movement in the U.S. And in this week's quick glance at the theocracy movement here at home, once again, we have to look at Florida. Florida, where a school district has just banned, Webster's Dictionary and Thesaurus for students, and the American Heritage Children's Dictionary. What the fuck? You're saying? Well, yes. And well, you might say, what the fuck? Dictionaries, encyclopedias, and the Diary of a Young Girl by Anne Frank are among the more than 2,800 books pulled by one Florida school district in an effort to comply with the law that Florida Governor Ron DeSantis signed last year. Judd Liggum is the author of Popular Information newsletter, which has reported that the Escambia County School District, Escambia, I should ask my stepmom. She's from Florida. Escambia County School District said that the books that have been banned pending further investigation may violate House Bill 1069, which gives residents the right to demand the removal of any library book in Florida that, quote, depicts or describes sexual conduct, end quote, as defined under Florida law, whether or not that book is pornographic. That's depicting or describing sexual conduct. Hence, the banning of dictionaries and encyclopedias, because there are words that are going to be defined that pertain, in fact, to sexual conduct.
Any decent dictionary, of course.
Right? It's, these are facts. I believe we call them the facts of life that apparently you're not allowed to find out about in Florida. Florida led the U.S. in book bans during the 22-23 school year, with the censorship watchdog group PEN America documenting nearly 2,000 instances of bans across 37 school districts in Florida. The PEN report noted, in a state with approximately 70 districts, this means that over half of all Florida school districts experienced banning activity. PEN, the watch group PEN, Penguin Random House, and a coalition of authors have joined parents and students last year in filing a lawsuit against Escambia County in federal court, arguing that the mass removal of books from school libraries violates the plaintiffs' right to free speech and equal protection under the law. There's a hearing that is expected later this week. Unsurprisingly, Florida's Republican attorney is backing this school district and their banning. In a brief submitted by the state of Florida in support of the school district, Attorney General Ashley Moody argued that the school board could ban books for any reason because the purpose of school libraries is to convey the government's message. And that can be accomplished through the removal of speech that the government disapproves. I'm just
totalitarian thinking.
Yeah, I could have sworn, wasn't it the Republicans like 15 years ago that wanted to make government small enough that you could drown it in a bathtub?
Yes, I mean, I see this as a
And
successful
yet-
part of the, post-Reagan attempt to destroy education, create an ignorant peasant class in the United States that is easily manipulated. We're there. They won.
Yeah, Attorney General Ashley Moody. I'm just going to say this again because when I saw it, my eyes, sort of went out of my head. The awooga sound played, I was right there. I became a Warner's Brother cartoon just for a moment. I'm going to say it again. Attorney General of Florida, Ashley Moody, says that the purpose of school libraries is to convey the government's message. Period.
People in the United States sometimes go to Europe and say, "Well, I've got a bachelor's. I'd like to undertake advanced studies in Europe." And often as not, they say, "Well, hold on just a moment. Your degree does not mean that you have a basis in humanities, that you even understand your own language very well at all, that you can write in it. It doesn't mean that you understand statistics, and you probably don't speak a foreign language. So how is it that you claim to be educated?" That's how far it's gone. A bachelor's degree means nothing.
On the world scene.
Yes.
In addition to Webster's Dictionary and the Thesaurus for Students and the American Heritage Children's Dictionary, Escambia County School District is denying students access to biographies of former Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall and the singer and songwriter Beyonce, as well as talk show host Oprah Winfrey, and so many others. Yeah, I'll leave it there. Also on Theocracy Watch, the good news. The good news would be last week I talked a lot about a horrific case in Ohio, and that was the case of Brittany Watts, who was turned away from medical care twice for care for a miscarriage because doctors were nervous that they could somehow or another get caught up in the anti-abortion, the anti-medical care for women hysteria that is going on currently. And so they turned her away from the hospital twice, where she then miscarried at home at great risk of catastrophic bleeding and in a lot of pain, also with risk of infection. And when she returned to the hospital for care, once again, a nurse asked her where the products of conception, what happened during her miscarriage, where are they? This proceeded to get a call to the law enforcement, the police department, who then went to Ms. Watts's home and dismantled her toilet, found the products of conception, took it to the coroner's office, who in fact confirmed that the fetus was non-viable and delivered stillborn or miscarried, right? But that wasn't enough. And this woman was further traumatized and charged with abuse of a corpse. Well, the good news is that the grand jury that was called to investigate and consider the case has decided not to charge Brittany Watts with abuse of a corpse. So there are no charges against her. There will be no case going forward, but this woman's life was turned upside down. Medical care was delayed. Her life was in jeopardy. And for all of that, she was threatened with a horrific criminal case. So at least that case is not going forward. Excuse me. At least that case is not going forward. And Ms. Watts has talked about needing to stay involved in the struggle to make sure that people have access to reproductive health care, and that choice prevails.
So have they repaired her home? Have they
Yeah.
offered her compensation for the trauma that she's suffered? I hope she sues the crap out of them and wins.
Yeah. There's no justice. There's just not a further trauma of having to endure the case. But there's still no justice served.
It's infuriating, and they'll try it again.
Yeah. So thank you for being with us this week. As always, I would invite you to subscribe. If you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, please do so. If you haven't had a chance to hit the like button, go ahead and hit it now. Also, hit the bell for notifications. You never know when we might do something spontaneous. I'm going to go ahead and let you know what the cards say for this week. It's an interesting reading, and I think that probably we could all spend some time grounding and centering and trying not to cough up hairballs, is what I'm seeing here. We have the devil, we have death inverted, and we have the Knight of Wands inverted. And what does this all mean? It means change is happening, and to resist change creates a lot of tension. So, in terms of the death card in the Cat Tarot portrayed as the vacuum cleaner, um, change is inevitable. It's going to happen. And certainly we see the world around us is changing rapidly and not always in ways that we are in agreement with, not always in ways that, okay, often in ways that we find harmful and frightening. But those changes are happening, and it's important to know that sticking our heads in the sand is not going to help. Um, but we actually need to consider our response. The knight, sorry, I'm going to keep saying king. The Knight of Wands inverted is a warning to really get our sort of destructive impulses under control. When we are feeling stressed, sometimes we lash out at those around us. Sometimes we do things that are not actually good for ourselves. And this is going to get us to the devil card. Sometimes we paint ourselves into corners with our words that we don't know how to then take accountability for and seek apology. Or to give apology. Sometimes we try to avoid looking at the painful changes that are going on through escapist means, drugs and alcohol, or other escapist behaviors that really are not going to serve us in the long run. So take a deep breath. Everyone, try to reach out and find support in our communities, in your communities. Take care of yourself and each other, and know that we are in a time of huge changes. It's they are swirling around us. We're not on stable ground, and we're going to have to learn how to accept that for a little while, because it's not firming up anytime real soon. We can help to shape it, but we have to do so together and in really strategic and considered action. We can't jump at shadows. We cannot run impulsively, over uh, other folks trying to advance our ideas first. We have to act in concert. We have to act together, and we have to take care of each other. That is the message of this particular tarot. Watch out for painting yourself into a corner. Make sure you take accountability for your actions. Do not jump at shadows, and be kind to each other, even as we face fear. And as we face changes that can bring up fear, stay kind and try to stay grounded and centered. And just, Jamara, stay warm. In fact, stay warm indeed. We're in for a very cold weekend throughout this region, and I hope that you are somewhere that you can be warm and comfortable. And we love you, and we look forward to seeing you again next week.
Yeah, I love the comments. Well, that's it. Our love goes out to you and to all the ships at sea. Bye now.
Bye bye.